Bitcoin is money. It's meant to be spent, but it makes you think twice because of the fact that you know it's going to appreciate in value. So it doesn't turn you into a mindless consumer. It turns you into a thoughtful saver. Money is just a tool that allows us to get stuff. All right. So if your money is not a store of value, then you will feel the need to spend it as soon as you get it. And that's what young people do with a lot of their money, because their money right now is not storing value. There's a reason $10,000 20 years ago stretched further than $10,000 today. The money is not storing its value. It's leaking all of its value.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Orange Peel Podcast. I'm your host, Nicki, and today I'm joined by someone who represents the next wave of Bitcoin conviction in our generation. Jordan, who's better known online as GenZBTC. While most young people get distracted by hype coins and quick gains, Jordan planted his flag firmly in Bitcoin only. So much so that his mantra can pretty much be said as stack sats or die trying. And this isn't just a catchphrase. It's quite literally a roadmap for how Gen Z can fight back against a system that's failing us. In this episode, we'll get into why Bitcoin only matters, how stacking sats is the simplest but most powerful move for young people right now, and why Gen Z's digital native advantage makes us the generation quite literally built for Bitcoin. Jordan, thanks so much for being here today. I am so psyched for this convo.
Nicki, that intro was so professional. Now I feel like I gotta be on my P's and Q's, no bad words and all that, but it's all good. Super excited. So thanks for reaching out. Really excited to talk to you. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I love your channel. I love the vibe of it. Let's start with your story, because with most of us our age, we start with like hype coins and meme coins and end up totally scorched and burnt. But you're straight Bitcoin only. Why?
Yeah. So for context, right, I'm 26 years old. So I am a elder Gen Z, right? I'm ancient compared to some of the youngsters, right? So as a 26-year-old who's been in Bitcoin for over 5 years now, right? I didn't start that way. So when I was first getting into investing and understanding how to make your money work for you, it was through the stock market. And it was through the meme stock market, right? So I started with GameStop. I started with AMC. And because I was kind of early to those waves, I did make money there. And there's like this joke and there's this saying when it comes to gambling and when it comes to investing, right? The first one's free, right? The first one's free. And the first one was free. That's how they get you hooked. So I had my money. I thought I was a genius. I was reading all the little Reddit posts. But as I started to get deeper down the rabbit hole and understand more about money itself, what is money? Where does money come from? Why do we use it? Right. That's when I made the transition from being a GameStop kid and being a meme coin kid to being a Bitcoin adult. All right. When you grow up, once you get a little bit more maturity, common sense, all that good stuff, you become Bitcoin only. Right. So that's essentially what happened. Now, again, why do we do this? Why do we say Bitcoin only compared to all these different cryptos that are so much better, right? So much more powerful, more advanced, right? Some people like to say Bitcoin is like MySpace and all these other new coins. My shiny little yo-yo coin, that's the one that's going to be like Twitter. It's going to be like Instagram, but it's not like that. A better analogy would be Bitcoin is the internet. There is no internet number 2 that's coming, right? Once you invent the wheel, right, it's a circle. The shape really isn't going to change. And that's what Bitcoin represents for us. You can take my word for that, or you can read the white paper. You can start to look at what makes Bitcoin different from crypto, right? There's all these different things like decentralization, the scarcity of it. And we've talked about that on my channel a lot. I know that Nicki's talked about that, and we're going to continue to talk about that because the real fight for Bitcoin is on the education front. So we do that every day. If you don't exactly get it yet, keep on learning, keep on watching, you'll figure it all out. But that's the reason we say Bitcoin only.
So before I get into a little bit of, diving into meme coins versus Bitcoin, because I do want to dissect that part. Out of my own curiosity, why did you start with, the meme stock market? Why did you start with GameStop?
I never owned any stocks prior to that. I never invested prior to that. And it was just so big. It was so popular. It was hot at the time. It just sucked me in, and very thankful for the Wall Street Bets guys, because even though a lot of them are not the brightest, right? They're not the best quants in the world. They got me my start, so you got to give them a little bit of respect. At least I do.
Good to know. Good to know. Touching back on meme coins versus Bitcoin then, a lot of the, persuasion to draw people towards meme coins revolves around price hype. We've seen Solana do crazy price jumps. We've seen Ethereum and Dogecoin, and you can take your pick of the bunch. Why does Bitcoin matter more over these price jumps? Why should someone choose to still invest in Bitcoin and still kind of have that ideology of long-term conviction over, short-term gains?
Yeah, I think it was American Hoddle who had the term of this financial nihilism, right? Where he talked about meme coins being this idea of, well, life sucks, nothing's ever going to get better. I'm not going to be able to make enough money to take care of myself, so I'm just going to gamble everything that I do have on this moonshot, fart coin thing and just pray that I hit. And if it doesn't, then well, my life already sucked anyway, so who cares? That's like this, nihilistic kind of negative thinking that leads you to make decisions that are not future conscious, right? Like you're not thinking of a future that's bright for yourself. You're thinking that the future is extremely bleak, so you're taking a massive chance. Meme coins are a lottery. Bitcoin is a new financial system. Bitcoin is a way of you actually being able to prepare for the future, to plan for your future, to build up the purchasing power that you need for the future, right? Getting yourself comfortable for the future, right? It's not well, I throw it in there and I sure do hope, there's no need to hope or wish about it. It's just the way that it works, right? And to someone on the outside who you haven't read the white paper, you don't know exactly how Bitcoin works, that might sound like gibberish or it might sound like wishful thinking. But there's a reason why so many individuals, so many companies, and even countries are looking into this new financial asset class, this new, network, right? And the network's going to continue to grow due to its properties. So if you're a meme coiner, truly you are playing the lottery. You have the same odds of trying to gamble. And if that's something that you like, I like gambling too. But even more than I like gambling, I like to know that my future is secured. So you can take a little bit of spare money and do your meme coins and do your whatever, but just understand that that is not the same as using Bitcoin as a financial tool, as a savings account, as a type of money that is separate from the state. These are all different aspects of Bitcoin that other meme coins, other altcoins cannot replicate.
What makes Bitcoin a financial tool?
What makes Bitcoin a financial tool is the fact that it is literally money. So we have this discrepancy between money and currency, right? And equities and all these different things, all these different assets. And we can go into this in more detail maybe another time. But the long story short is currency is issued by a central authority, right? Gold coins are currency, not because they're made out of gold, but because the government says that this is a 16-ounce coin, or this is a 4-ounce coin, or this is a whatever. This is a $1 bill. This is a $10 bill. They're the ones issuing the currency. They're setting the rules, right? Bitcoin is money, all right? Gold is also money. If you find a gold nugget or something like that, it's money. It can be used as a medium of exchange. It stores value, but there's no issuer of gold in its natural state, all right? Find gold if you understand that gold is an element that is naturally occurring in the universe, right? It's not necessarily issued as a currency. It only becomes currency once it's refined, written on, right? It's stamped with its little serial number and then issued by the government. That's when it transfers from money into currency. Bitcoin is money, right? It's a money that everyone can access and they don't need to have a centralized authority to give it its value, right? Paper dollars have their value because the state is issuing that value. It tells you that you have to use this as money. Otherwise, we will use violence against you, right? The state has a monopoly on violence and therefore they have a monopoly on money. All right. So when it comes to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a money that is not controlled by the state. This is a huge value proposition that most people don't understand, but there's no intermediary in the middle and there's no issuer of the currency. It's just a money that exists. Satoshi created the protocol, gave it to us, and now we can use that to separate money and state and create a true free market. And that's why Bitcoin has so much value as money, as an asset class, as whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that conviction definitely leads to something much bigger that's at play here, at least in Gen Z. We're totally losing trust in banks and governments and even our universities, even our colleges. We can see that there's a problem and that something bigger is definitely happening. And it's honestly, it's something sinister. Do you see that distrust that we have fueling Bitcoin adoption sometime in the future?
Yeah, it's fueling it right now. There's a lot of people who don't trust their government. They don't trust their ability to control and stabilize the economy, right? They don't trust their ability to responsibly issue currency in a way that doesn't completely debase it, right? We're witnessing all this happen in real time where all these governments don't know what to do besides print their way out, right? Shout out to Lawrence Lepard, right? This is why we have the big print. My thing's not focusing. This is why we have the big print. And the reason why we're having the big print is because there's nothing they can do about the debt. Eventually you can kick the can down the road. You can keep saying, oh, well, the next generation will pay for it. The next generation will pay for it. Someone's actually going to have to pay for it eventually. And we're pretty much at that time now, right? No one wants the treasuries. No one wants their bonds anymore. No one wants their toxic waste debt, right? And they have no choice but to print. So when you are feeling fearful of your government because they're incompetent or maybe they're malicious, you know, maybe you feel like you're getting cracked down on and you're in an authoritarian regime, right? Maybe you are a marginalized group somewhere in a country that doesn't like you and your people, and then you feel like they're going to take away your ability to transact or to have a bank account or to have access to money and make your own financial decisions for you to be a sovereign individual. Anytime you feel threatened by any of these forces, that's why Bitcoin exists, right? It exists for more reasons, but that's one of the reasons why Bitcoin exists. That's the reason why humanitarians love Bitcoin and why dictators hate it, because they cannot control it. They can't stop it. They can't use it to control the masses and control their people. It's a freedom technology. So as soon as you understand that, you're understanding another level, another layer of Bitcoin's story. You wouldn't know that if all you did was look at the price and maybe every now and then you saw a news story talking about how, well, this young person got rich buying crypto or whatever it is. That's just surface level. You're not getting the actual meat and bones of why this is a important and transformative technology.
You used a term earlier that I really, really like. You mentioned financial nihilism, which I've been talking a bit about it on my channel. I've, talked to people about how Gen Z is so averse to saving because the idea of buying a home, buying a car, even starting a family, that's so far into our financial future. The age at which, people are getting married is just getting older and older and older. Most of us, at least in college, I'm 19, most of my friends are 20, 21, around that age, they're not even worried about saving. They're like, for us, there's no point to even invest because it's like, oh, we'll just do it later. Where does Bitcoin fit into this system? Why is it important that we hop on this train now, that we realize what's going on now and actually, maybe dip our foot into the puddle?
Yeah. This was a tweet from a guy, Wealth Squad Chris. Make sure y'all at Chris, bro. I'm trying to get on his show too. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to tap in with Chris. But he said being broke at 30 starts at 20, right? And that is extremely true. That's true for anyone who's 40. Being broke at 40 started at 30, So why do we invest? Why do we save? Why do we have money in the first place, right? Part of what money is a store of value, right? So you're able to hold the money knowing that you'll be able to exchange it in the future for stuff. All right. Because at the end of the day, no matter what anyone says, we really don't want money. Here comes someone in the comments, bro, you can't live without money, bro. You're not listening, dog. You don't want money. You want stuff. Money is just a tool that allows us to get stuff. All right. So if your money is not a store of value, then you will feel the need to spend it as soon as you get it. And that's what young people do with a lot of their money, because their money right now is not storing value. There's a reason $10,000 20 years ago stretched further than $10,000 today. The money is not storing its value. It's leaking all of its value. It's losing its value, right? And this is what creates that financial nihilism. There's other factors, right? Considering that, there's inflation and obviously the cost of living is rising faster than our income. You're getting a 2% raise, but the CPI is 3%. And then the real rate of inflation is 7%. There's a lot of factors working against you that are making you, whether you realize it or not, it's incentivizing you to be a spender instead of a saver. Bitcoin is the opposite. Bitcoin turns you into a saver instead of a spender. Because if your money is tied up in Bitcoin, one, No one can debase that. There is no fluctuating inflation rate of Bitcoin, right? There's a controlled issuance, and no one can control that issuance. No one can turn on a spigot and make more Bitcoins, and no one can pop them out of existence. They can do that with dollars. That's why they lose value so quickly. And then secondly, when you hold so much Bitcoin, you have to stop and think, do I really need this thing right now? Because if I spend it, if I let go of my Bitcoin for this thing, there's going to be seller's remorse, right? I'm going to think back and say, oh my gosh, I had 4 Bitcoins that I spent on that Lamborghini Huracan. That was stupid. If I would have saved for 4 years, I could have bought it with half of a Bitcoin and I would have still had 3.5, you know? So at the end of the day, Bitcoin is money. It's meant to be spent, but it makes you think twice because of the fact that you know it's going to appreciate in value. So it doesn't turn you into a mindless consumer. It turns you into a thoughtful saver. That's a great tweet. I'm going to send that out. That was amazing. That's a great line right there. Clip that.
Definitely. Oh my God, that was actually really good. I'm going to tweet that as well, if you don't mind me stealing it.
Let's go. Let's go.
So let's get into saving actually a little bit, because again, one thing about us is we don't have money. None of us have money. I do not have money. My friends do not have money. We're really young. And when it comes to saving, I mean, I try to do what I can out of my budget. You know, I have right now, I've been able to muster maybe like 100 AUD a month, which is, it's somewhat of maybe 70, 75-ish. It's something. It's something. But what are some things that Gen Z can do, some things that young adults can do to build good saving habits, to build good investing habits right now, pretty early on?
Right. Yeah, the main thing is just starting, you know, and this is for everyone. Never feel bad about the amount of money that you're able to save, because everyone's story is a little bit different. You know, we're all going to have our chance to pop, you know what I'm saying? We don't all pop at the same time, but it all is a process, you know? So just because you're only saving 100, whatever a month, there's someone who can only do 50, and there's someone who can only do 10. And then there's someone who's going negative every month. They're going deeper in debt every month. So you cannot let that deter you, right? Don't let that stop you. What you need to do is you need to be consistent. You need to be disciplined. You need to be focused. You need to have a plan. You need to write that plan out, right? You need to understand, what am I doing this for? What am I trying to achieve? And then you need to try to work towards that. How do we work towards that? One thing that we can try to do is automation, right? Because letting go of our money, forfeiting our money, right, is very difficult, right? Because that's how people see saving. You're forfeiting your ability to consume today to be able to hopefully consume more in the future when the time comes. It's hard to do that. So you need to automate that process. Do not look at your bank account and then forcefully or manually take the $100 out at the end of the month. Set up something automatic where you're automatically moving $100 into Bitcoin, or you're automatically moving $100 into your savings account. I'm 100% Mr. Bitcoin. You know what I mean? They literally call me Mr. Bitcoin at my job. And that's cool. That's great. But everyone's not going to just jump to that immediately. So start with personal finance, however you do your personal finance. Some of these guys, they have their high yield savings accounts, high yield. They're really not high yield, right? But you have to start somewhere, okay? I started in Wall Street Bets, dude. All right. So you might say, oh, this kid's not qualified. He's literally a gambling idiot. That's fine. You can think what you like. But if you look at my track record, if you look at some of the things that I've spoken about, how I talk about finance, it's obvious that I'm not just some degen who woke up and learned everything off of one Reddit post, right? You know, I've read a lot of books about finance. I keep reading books about finance. I like to read op-eds. You know, I like to watch the Yahoo Finance guys sometimes yap about whatever they're yapping about. It's an entire process. You know, you start to speak the language of finance. I have a lot more to learn, you know, but it all starts as a process. So as a young person, even though it might be boring and no one else is really talking about it, you need to lock in a little, bro, and start focusing on your finances. Otherwise, when it's time to go out, it's time to party, it's time to do whatever y'all are doing, you can't go. You're stuck in the crib because you got no bread, right? Literally, you have no bread, you have no cheese, you're hungry, you know, you ain't got nothing but them ramen cups, and you got nothing in the bank account because you were not thinking, you know, you were not thinking. And you don't have to have no $100 an hour job. You know, I've never made any more than $20 an hour for my entire life until recently. Of course, my sales job, I'm doing very well. And we can talk about that in a moment as well. Regardless of whether I was making a little bit of money or not, my goal was the same. My goal was to stack as much Bitcoin as possible. And once I understood that that was my goal, I just stuck to it. Started with $5 a day. Then I moved up, then I moved up, then I moved up. If something ever came up, all right, let's pause the daily buy. I got to take care of what I got to take care of, right? You can't just be financially irresponsible, running up a bunch of credit cards, not paying your bills because you want to stack Bitcoin. That's not really going to work, bro. So you have to take care of what you got to take care of and then use Bitcoin as your savings account. That's probably the smartest and most practical way of getting it done. And that's what I've done. That's what I'm going to continue.
Out of pure curiosity for me and honestly a little bit of selfishness, have you tried to orange pill, your coworkers and your friends?
Yeah. I do that all the time. And I will say, when I first really got deep into Bitcoin, I talked about it quite a bit, right? I mentioned it a lot, maybe at times where it wasn't necessary. But now I'm at the point where I don't talk about Bitcoin like at all, but people still talk to me about Bitcoin. But you have to plant the seed, right? You plant the seed with people. Maybe you let them know in a relevant context that you're really big on Bitcoin. Then they're going to ask you about crypto. Well, what do you think about XRP? Like, bro, don't do that. You know what I mean? Don't swear at me. Once you plant that seed, have a little conversation with them about it. The next time they see it on the news, oh, a new all-time high. Interesting. I'm going to hit up that Jordan guy, talk to him about some Bitcoin stuff, right? Sometimes you don't even mention it. You just rock the hat, you rock the shirt, and then that's how you start conversation. I'll wear something like this to the gym, and then we start talking finance, start talking Bitcoin. I've had some people come up to me about stuff that I wear, and that's a silent signal. That's a nice, easy way to do it. You don't have to go up to anyone. They can maybe come up to you. Maybe they don't say anything, but either way, you're sending that silent signal of Bitcoin, right? You're not wearing an Ethereum logo hat. You're not wearing a Solana logo hat. No one even knows what those are. Most people cannot identify that, but most people know what this is, the orange coin. They know what Bitcoin is because the brand is so strong, and people like us continue to bolster that brand. We make it more popular and we make it more interesting. So when you're the Bitcoin guy in your friend group, or you're the Bitcoin guy at your job, or the Bitcoin girl at the university, right? Then that's cool, because people already know you. They already kind of like you. They can already kind of trust you. So that makes them think, this person that I like, that I trust, that I respect is really big on Bitcoin. Maybe I can talk to them about it. You got to be that beacon of education for people. And that's what I try to do for my friends, family, coworkers. And it's been going really well, and I'm never going to stop doing that.
I mean, that's awesome. I'm really, really glad that you are able to orange pill your loved ones. How did you go about planting that seed, though? Because I feel like I'm talking to my friends and I'm talking to whoever's interested, but I feel like a broken record. Like, I'm always like, guys, like, the system is broken. We're losing our purchasing power. Like, fiat money is evil. Guys, listen to me.
Yeah.
Nothing.
No,
and I get nowhere.
Yeah. No, I get it. Like, the art of selling Bitcoin, or the art of orange pilling, is very difficult because you are trying to explain a paradigm shift. So when the apple falls from the tree and hits Newton in the head, and he starts explaining the laws of motion, the laws of the universe, right? It's literally just gibberish, to everyone else, because you are trying to uncover something that is new. You're trying to explain something that's very new. We'll find better ways to explain it over time, every single day. But until then, it's just a matter of finding out what's relevant to people and then trying to package Bitcoin in that same kind of lens, right? So if someone's really big on energy and infrastructure, and the fact that we're using so much energy and we need more renewables, that's when we talk about, well, Bitcoin uses over 50% renewable energy. And here's the reason why, right? Miners are always looking for stranded energy, cheap energy, energy that is, renewable, clean, stuff like that. If they're really big on humanitarianism, then yes, that's when we talk about Bitcoin's ability to help whistleblowers, right? To make sure that they can get paid safely and also do what they have to do to keep exposing the evils of our world. Or if they're big on women's rights, there was a time where women didn't have credit cards and they couldn't get them without their husband's approval or whatever. Well, guess what? That still happens in some places. That's why you have Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a permissionless system. No one can stop it, and no one needs to give you permission to use it. All right. That's why we use Bitcoin. So find out what's relevant to them. Okay. Oh, my groceries, they're 2 times as high as they were 2 years ago. Why is that? Is it just greedy Walmart? right? Well, maybe, but you're buying all these different products from there. They're all getting more expensive at the same time. I think what's actually happening is your dollar's losing value, right? And then you go on their whole little tangent that you got to go on, but you got to keep it relevant. Bitcoiners get very lectury, well, BlackRock is a multi-trillion-dollar asset manager and they're buying all this Bitcoin. And also Michael Saylor, no one knows who that is, bro. Who is Michael Saylor? No one knows who that is. They will know who it is, but right now, no one knows who that is. So who cares what he's doing? All right. Most people, again, BlackRock, yeah, they know them because they buy a lot of houses above listing price. But besides that, I mean, saying BlackRock's buying a bunch doesn't make them oh, my ears are perked up. I'm so excited. They don't care about that. They just think, oh, great, another thing that's owned and controlled by the elites. You want to ruin my day some more? There's a certain way that we have to talk about Bitcoin. Keep it relevant. Don't lecture people and learn how to sell, bro. You're going to have to learn how to sell just in general in life. You're going to have to learn how to sell. We do it every day, whether you realize it or not. So learn how to sell, and that can help you with your orange pilling journey. You don't have to be an orange pillar. You don't have to try to convince people to be on the Bitcoin standard. It's going to happen anyway. But if you care about someone, if you actually like them, you're probably going to try to get them on the Bitcoin train sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I'm not trying to spread any agenda here, but you see your friends and you see the shift happening in the finances and the economy of the world. It's your moral duty to help them. It's to share what you believe in. But let's zoom out here because I want to, get some hopeful stuff in. So our generation has this digital native edge, right? Where we've practically grown up on the internet and our phones and social media, whatever it is, your pick of the bunch. Does that give us a head start in Bitcoin, compared to some of the older folk who have to trust that, now their money is going to be on the internet?
Yeah, no, I think so. Gen Zers, Gen Alpha, we already kind of understand, okay, my Fortnite skin is digital. I understand how that works. My V-Bucks, my COD points, all this other stuff. And it's just simpler, right? They can understand it more easily compared to someone who's a little bit older, right? They might have a finance background, but that's a traditionalist view of the world. They only understand a lot of analog assets. And they don't really understand how this magic internet money in cyberspace can have any more use than the delusion of all the people who are involved in the network, right? But those same people, if you take their work laptop or their work desktop or their work phone and you delete all of the digital stuff off of it, they're going to be pissed because all the value is gone. Now you just have a wiped piece of hardware, which is junk at the end of the day. If you don't have all of your paperwork, all of your contacts, all of your ability to connect with the people who allow you to do your job every day. So the network is what really matters. The information is what has all the value. Bitcoin is an energy-based currency, right? That's storing our economic information, right? It's storing the ledger. All the different transactions are getting validated. They're being secured every 10 minutes. And that's where a lot of the value comes from. Again, when you talk about Bitcoin and you talk about value, there's so many different value propositions. The ability to transact between two people without an intermediary, the ability to circumvent oppressive regimes and get people paid or send money out to people without anyone stopping it. But the fact that it's the most secure network in the world, right? The fact that it's the most decentralized network in the world. The fact that it's a saleable asset, right? It's pretty much accepted anywhere that anyone wants to accept it, and it can be converted into any currency anywhere in the world. It's a global network. It's a global currency. It's a global money, rather. So yeah, I mean, there's so many different pieces of Bitcoin that make so much sense. And I think young people will understand those more quickly than people of a previous generation.
One thing I wanted to ask, and this one might be a little bit, tough to answer, but we have a generation that really resonates with social justice and movements. We want to feel like we're fighting for something, and that's been pretty obvious in recent years with the climate that we've got going on right now. But how can you frame Bitcoin as a movement for social justice?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And I think what we need to do is understand what's the problem. Where does a lot of our injustice come from? Right? A lot of the injustice stems from the government's monopoly on money printing. Because when you have fiat money or money by decree of the government, you have a lot of downstream problems, so I'll just think of some off the top of my head. So first, if the government's able to print money at will, right, you're creating value out of nowhere, which is really the dilution of value. So when that happens, you're making everyone else poorer. Okay. Everyone else gets more poor when you do that. This form of like crony capitalism, this form of what is it called? When quintillionaires, the quintillionaires, the guys who are close to the money printer who get access to it first, right? But none of the money ever trickles down. The only trickle down effect that we actually get is the expansion of the monetary supply. So if you have $1 in a system that has $100 total, you have 1% of the network, right? But then if that expands out, if we print money and you still have only $1 and the money system expands out to $10,000, then you have less than 1% of 1% of the network. You just got extremely poor by comparison to the size of the network. And that's what we're doing when we print money. Some of the downstream effects, let's say that you are a small business owner, right? And you sell wine. If you're selling wine and everything's good before all of the debasement happens, you can keep selling it for $10. Everyone's happy. It's high quality. It's cheap, or it's fairly priced, whatever you want to say. Once all the money printing starts happening and the inflation starts hitting everyone hard, right? It's hitting your customers' pockets and it's hitting yours as well as a business operator, right? Because now you have a few options, okay? You can continue selling the wine for $10 only, even while everything else is going up in price. And if you do that, you run the risk of going bankrupt because you cannot keep up with the increased cost of the rent at the location that you have. You cannot keep up with the increased cost of the grapes, of the glass for the bottles, for the labeling, because everything else is going up and you're staying the same. So you're going to be out of business. You're going to get crushed by inflation. Second thing you can do is you can sell your customers who have been so loyal to you, you can sell them a worse product. Hey guys, I can't really keep up with all of this inflation. It's killing me. So I'm just going to water down the wine. And now you're getting a worse wine for the same price. At least it's for the same price. You're welcome, and then people stop coming because the wine sucks now, even though it's cheap. Now it's literally cheap wine. No one wants that. So then you go out of business again. And then the third thing you can do is increase your prices just like everyone else. And inflation just keeps on running rampant. Everything goes up and up and up. The price of the wine keeps going up forever. Everything just keeps going up forever. And I guess you can try to stay afloat and outpace inflation by increasing your prices even faster. But then maybe your business slows down because people are just like, I can't keep up, bro. It's too expensive. I can't buy that expensive wine. I'm going to go just drink water. So you still might go out of business. Either way, you're faced with the problem of inflation. You have to deal with it. The government's not going to deal with it for you. You've got to do it. And that happened to you because of people who weren't even elected. These Fed chairs who no one even knows. They're almost like these shadow bankers who make these decisions that affect everyone in the country. You don't get to vote on that. It just happens to you. And then you have to figure it out. So that's some of the problem with money printing and fiat. Bitcoin solves that exact problem. That's only one problem, by the way. That should be enough for people to want to rally and realize, oh, you know what? This is a pretty good idea. You know what? I do like this a lot better. I'm actually going to opt in to the Bitcoin system instead of being forced in to a fiat and money printing system. I don't like this system anymore. I'm going to go to the new one.
You know what? Something I came across this weekend that I just found out for like the very first time was Nancy Pelosi, who was the Speaker of the House. If you're watching this and you're not aware of, US Gov stuff, is regarded as the greatest investor of all time. Better than Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. I mean, if you're watching this, you're not insane. Something is so deeply wrong at play here. But I mean, it sounds like, we've got such a great chance in our hands. We've got all of the power with Bitcoin. And I want to get into a little bit of what you're doing over at your channel, over at GenZBTC. So how did you start Bitcoin content creation?
My first video was just me in my car, I think like about a year ago. It was January 1st. So it was literally my New Year's resolution. I was like, all right, I'm going to make my Bitcoin YouTube channel. I've been talking about this. I'm just going to go do it, and I was like, oh, this is so cringe. Guess what? It's still cringe. And that's fine because cringe has made me money, right? It's got me a lot of connections. It's made me customers at my job. It's made me a speaker at events, right? It's got me VIP. It's got me backstage places. So yeah, nothing wrong with being cringe, little bro. All you have to do is be cringe consistently. And then a bunch of racks start coming in, And it's not like I'm doing it because Bitcoin just makes you so much money on YouTube. Like, yeah, Bitcoin YouTuber, I'm bigger than Mr. Beast. No one cares about Bitcoin. All right. This is a small niche. So I'm not doing it for the fame and the fortune, but you're doing it, like you said, it's almost like this civic duty that you have to speak truth to power, and talk about why Bitcoin matters. And again, if you're a hater, you'll hear that and you'll be like, oh, these guys have some sort of savior complex and they think that they're just so smart. And one day all their Bitcoins are going to be gone. And then what are they going to say then? Hey, all I can say is keep holding your breath, my friend. We'll send the paramedics to come help you when the time comes, when you pass out. But I wouldn't do that if I were you, So at the end of the day, I am a Bitcoiner. I talk about Bitcoin because it's an interest of mine. It's just a little thing that I find interesting, right? Two, Bitcoin is hope for a lot of people who are extremely hopeless. So the same way that I was inspired by Bitcoin University, the same way I was inspired by Ioni Appelberg, the same way that I was inspired by some of Michael Saylor's speeches, I want to try to inspire someone else who might be on the other side, just getting started. And then when it's their time to do their interview, because they became a content creator and they get to say, GenZBTC, that guy, his channel got me started, So why would I not do that?
I mean, that's pretty great. Have you had one conversation or kind of just something that somebody has said to you throughout your, I guess, journey is a way to put it, that really just changed the way you saw Bitcoin altogether?
I got to attribute it to Ioni Appelberg. He has a YouTube channel. He does a lot of animations, maybe some of the best videos of all time, highly underrated channel. Some of them have less than 20,000 views, and there was a video called, it might be titled How Bitcoin Mining Works or What Bitcoin Mining Is, something like that. Very impressive video. And it just sparked my curiosity like crazy. And everybody has that Bitcoin moment where you look back and you think, well, if this thing is actually what I think it is, this is the greatest invention of all time. And that's when you start to understand it a little bit more. You go down the rabbit hole. That's when the education starts happening on your part, right? Now it's all self-education. You're really trying to grind to figure out what this thing even is, why it's never going away, why it keeps dying and then coming back, and yeah, I got to give it to Ioni. Ioni is the GOAT. He doesn't really upload that often, unfortunately. Kind of pisses me off, Ioni. If you ever see this, please do more. But yeah, he's the GOAT. That's all I can say. One of the greatest videos explaining Bitcoin mining and how it's tied to energy and why that gives it a lot of its value. So shout out to Ioni.
Yeah, agreed. I see that video as well. Incredible. Incredible. I discovered it a bit later into my Bitcoin journey. But on that note, then I always like to ask if there's one, book or podcast or anything, and maybe you can use this as an opportunity to promote your own channel that you would recommend to someone who's just starting out and trying to learn and maybe go beyond just orange peel to learn about Bitcoin.
Yes. Before I answer that, Nicki, don't tell me that we're done. All right, we're only at 40 minutes. We got more. We got more to chat about. All right. But in terms of what I can recommend to people in my own channel, in my description, every single time I copy paste a link for all these other resources and other channels people can watch, So again, it's really not about my views. I'm not going to get views until way, way further into the future because the Bitcoin niche is just too small. Eventually it'll be the biggest niche in the world. And then people will eventually just stop talking about Bitcoin because it's just going to be normal. There's no YouTube channels talking about, the internet or like the dollar in general because the networks are already there. There's nothing left to talk about those, we use them, but right now with Bitcoin, the niche is very small. It's still growing and there's plenty of great resources to use besides my channel. My channel is good. Let's be real with ourselves. All right. My channel is pretty good, but, there are things like the Sailor series with Robert Breedlove, right? That is goated. That is one of the greatest series of all time. Like that playlist is insane. It is so good. They don't just talk about Bitcoin. Okay. They talk about evolution, human psychology. They talk about the development of nations, some of Saylor's early talks where he doesn't talk about Bitcoin by itself necessarily. He talks about the evolution of history, right? He talks about the Romans. He talks about how he used to study history. Why did the Roman Empire collapse? He talks about the Carthaginians and all this other stuff. I didn't even know what that was until those videos. You know what I mean? Carthaginians. It sounds like a disease. I don't know what that is. But then, I looked into it. He broke it all down. It was cool. And I used to listen to those when I worked in this warehouse. No offense, but to the people who might see this, they ain't never going to see this. Doesn't matter. But I worked in a tweaker warehouse, right? There was a lot of tweakers in there. You know what I'm saying? A lot of OSHA violations in there. Some days you would pack. You would be a packer. You take the item, you pack it in a box, and you would stay there for 8 hours, right? And I worked 10-hour shifts actually, but you would be there for 10 hours and you had your little breaks and whatever. And I would have my headphones in and I would listen to Bitcoin content. I would listen to the Saylor series. I would listen to these podcasts and all these interviews with Lynn Alden, with Jeff Booth, with, of course, Michael Saylor, with Antonopoulos, right? Andreas Antonopoulos, he fell off. All right. He fell off big time, but he was a GOAT back in the day, with his crazy hairline. There's so many great creators. More of them are going to pop up over time. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. And that's all I can say. The Swan YouTube channel is great. The Simply Bitcoin YouTube channel is great. There's so many great channels out there that you can watch that are Bitcoin only, that are giving you great signal. I can't list them all right now, but the ones I did say, I would highly recommend to anyone.
Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, the one thing about Bitcoin is, like you were saying, there's so many of us out there. You can have your pick one that totally tailors to your niche, explains it how you want to learn it. And, just to name drop here, you mentioned Lynn Alden, Jeff Booth. If you're a book person, Broken Money, Price of Tomorrow, Bitcoin Standard. I started with the Bitcoin Standard. I started with that and What's the Problem? Joe Bryan. Incredible. Yeah. I watched it back in January, and I come from a very financially literate family. So my parents have always kind of been yapping about money since I can remember. Mm-hmm. And they really got into Bitcoin 2020. They got into Bitcoin 2022-ish, really got into Bitcoin last year or 2023. My dad sat me down to watch What's the Problem? And when I tell you, it was a 180-degree shift, a switch clicked in my head where it's okay, so there's something deeply, deeply wrong at play here. And I mean, we're growing up, right? You're a little bit older than I am, so you've been in adulthood a bit longer, but you've probably noticed your groceries are increasing, your rent has gone up. I mean, my rent has hiked twice in the past 2 years. That's not normal. That's not normal. One of my friends, she is living in Toronto right now, and I was just chatting with her before this actually. And she mentioned that the price that she pays half of her rent. She has one roommate for a 2-bed in the Toronto CBD area. Back in the day, her parents paid the same price as what she paid for a 2-bed, 2-bath in Chicago. This was 20 years ago?
Yeah, but I mean, it's just, you might not get it. You don't necessarily know what's happening. And that's why we're looking for someone to blame. All my prices are going up compared to 30 years ago because of all this AI, or it's going up because of Bitcoin. Literally, some people think that, which is, I don't know how you get there, but whatever. Some people will say, oh, it's all these immigrants, they're raising the price of everything, and that's why the food is higher, and that's why you know what I mean? And it's just, you're looking for something. It's the Democrats, it's the Republicans, it's the whatever. That's the whole point of that video. What's the problem? You know what I mean? Point to the root. Let's actually think from first principles. Let's talk about what actually matters and what's actually happening, and not just be super emotional about everything and attribute the wrong causes to our situation, right? And Bitcoin really is that solution. It's just hard to understand the solution when you don't even know the problem. Some people just think, it's just the way the world is. You need the economy to expand. So in order to do that, you have to expand the monetary supply. But that's just not how it works. It's just not how it works. Unfortunately for the Keynesians, it's all good. Y'all still have time to learn. It's never too late. Eventually you will learn. So shout out to Saifedean Ammous and the Bitcoin Standard, because one of the greatest lines of all time, all right, is Bitcoin is financial gunpowder, right? You can ignore it if you want, but the people who adopt the harder money are just going to crush you. You can say it's not fair. You can say it's whatever. It is fair, actually. It's just a matter of your intelligence, right? Being able to act in your own self-interest. Being able to act in your own self-interest is an act of intelligence, by the way. And your ability to set aside your ego and realize that you may have been duped or tricked, or that the information that you had previously was just incorrect, right? So if you can do both of those things, then you'll be able to understand Bitcoin with an open mind, and then you'll be an adopter, and then maybe even an educator of Bitcoin. If you cannot do those two things, right? So if you are an idiot and you have a massive ego and you cannot do any sort of introspection and look inward and realize that, oh, you know what, I might have made a mistake. If you can't do that, then you are not going to make it. Nothing else I can say.
Yeah, you mentioned some great stuff there, but one thing you said was we're looking for someone to blame. And we've resorted to blaming big corporations and capitalism and whatever it is you want to blame. Who's actually to blame here? Who is actually the reason for what's going on? Who deserves to get the brunt of all of our anger?
The largest force that's driving a lot of this at the end of the day is bankers, right? Central bankers, government bankers, because they are the ones who control money, the issuance of currency, right? The ability to buy back their own treasuries is money printing. So when stuff like that happens, that's why we get the inflation of the amount of money in circulation. And that's what kills us. That's what crushes us. That's what destroys our small businesses. And that's what helps to sometimes strengthen the big businesses that are in the pockets of the banks, right? So if I had to pick one bad actor in the space that's doing a lot of the I guess damage, you gotta give it to Jerome Powell. You gotta give it to Jerome Powell and his buddies. At the end of the day, that kid is to blame, and you should try to abolish the Fed at all levels. So shout out to Thomas Massey. He will never get that done, by the way. At least he's trying. So good for him. Very brave.
We've talked a bit about inflation, but I want to touch on some of the other problems that Bitcoin solves, because I've yapped about inflation so much on this channel. Every guest that I've brought on, I've tried to hammer in the idea that your money is basically worthless. I mean, your money, it's totally in the hands of the government and you don't have any power whatsoever. But what are some other things that Bitcoin solves?
Yeah, we kind of touched on this a little earlier, but there's, the issue of energy, right? People keep saying, oh, we're going to run out of, and this is a stupid fake lie that they tell once every, decade. Oh, we're going to run out of oil, any day now. No, you're not actually. You're never going to run out of oil. If you think that, you're genuinely an idiot. So that's not going to happen. We're going to burn up the whole earth, bro. It's like, no, you're actually not going to do that either. But if you were, then Bitcoin's a way to avoid that, because you would use hydropower, you want to use solar, and you want to use wind, you want to use nuclear, right? And how can we pay for all this stuff? The whole point is that Bitcoin literally pays for itself. You go somewhere where the energy is stranded, right? And you say, all right, we're going to build a solar farm here. But it might not be profitable because there's no large city nearby or whatever it might be. You mine Bitcoin there, all right? The Bitcoin that you mine from that operation pays for the operation, and then you keep mining more Bitcoin, and then you can expand the operation. You could build a city there. You could do whatever you want to do. Wherever you try to get the energy from, that is where you get your economic benefit from. So if there's any stranded energy, you're monetizing that area instantly by doing that, and that's why all these Bitcoin miners are building all these dams that are connected to other cities, or they're building like these power infrastructure plants that are tied directly to the grid. Natalie Brunell had a great interview recently about the whole energy debate with Bitcoin. And if you want to stabilize the grid, if you want to actually push renewables, right, then you're going to want to be a Bitcoiner. If you want to fight climate change or whatever, then you're going to have to be a Bitcoiner, because otherwise it's not economically feasible to do any of the stuff that you want to do. If you want to move completely away from fossil fuels, all right, sure. But we're going to have to build out the infrastructure, and you cannot build it out for free. You can't just, we're not going to use any more oil or any petroleum, which again will never happen. Petroleum is a very, flexible commodity. You can do a lot with petroleum. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to turn it into gasoline. There's all these different things we want to do. You just can't do them because you would be losing money. and no one's going to just go negative on building out a bunch of solar. You know what I mean? Bitcoin makes it profitable to build out all of the solar, all the hydro, all the wind, all the nuclear, that you could think of, Then there's flared gas, there's all this CO2, there's all this methane that we put into the air. You can literally capture that. You can use that also to mine Bitcoin. Again, the applications are massive. There's some guy named, I think his name is Jason. I forget his last name, but if you look up Jason Bitcoin environmental, he'll come up. Some environmentalist guy. He's awesome. A lot of great content that he makes. So shout out to him. I learned a lot about the Bitcoin environmental impact from him. So he's awesome. And then again, if you're a marginalized group, you need Bitcoin. If you use money, you need Bitcoin. So I think that encompasses everyone. So it takes time to understand all the different use cases, but they're all there. There's a lot.
And if you're going to take anything out of this episode, take that. Maybe if, inflation isn't scaring you for whatever reason, let everything else scare you. Let the climate crisis and social injustice and wealth inequality, whatever it is, Bitcoin is pretty much your solution. It sounds like that. And, as I mentioned, there's no end to the resources that are out there for you to learn. So on that note, to close out things, if someone who's starting out with Bitcoin now wants to actually get something done, wants to actually maybe invest or learn more, what would you tell them to do?
Yeah, if you want to invest more, learn more, me personally, I think that a nice and simple resource is the Bitcoin Reddit frequently asked questions section. Again, I really don't use Reddit like that, but back in the day when I was trying to figure it out, here's how I really got into Bitcoin, if I'm being honest. I started to try to figure out how it couldn't work. I worked for like months and months asking different questions like, how could Bitcoin fail? What about this? What about that? What about this? Oh, did you think about this? Trust me, someone's already thought about that, and that's how I eventually got comfortable enough to say, you know what? This thing doesn't look like it's going anywhere, right? And still the case. 5 years later, 6 years later, still the case. Doesn't look like it's going anywhere. So maybe try to look into how Bitcoin is going to fail. Right. You got to be honest with yourself about that, because there's going to be someone who says, well, quantum computer is obviously going to blow up Bitcoin any day now. It's not going to happen, but you need to figure out why that's not happening. Because again, Satoshi has over 1 million Bitcoins. That's billions of dollars, by the way, just sitting there for anyone to hack. No one can hack it. So there's free money there that no one's taken. So maybe that should be a little bit of a sign that maybe this thing is really hard to hack. Maybe the quantum computer thing is probably not going to work, So just be honest with yourself, even if you find the answer, try to question that answer. You really got to dig. At the end of the day, you just have to dig. You cannot take everything at face value. You have to be curious. You have to have the ethos of a Bitcoiner. What is that ethos? It's to don't trust. You have to verify. So keep grinding, try to verify as much as you can, put some of the source code of Bitcoin through a AI translator, right? Have it translate the code, have it tell you what this means and what it does. I did that, because I can't read code. And if that's not good enough for you, because you're trusting the AI, then go read code, bro. Go figure it out yourself. Go do that. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So anyone who studied Bitcoin for more than a few hours understands that it's not a scam. It's not this toy. It's not a meme coin. It's not going anywhere, right? And the people who typically criticize Bitcoin, they're either disingenuous or they've done no research of their own, which is why they talk from a position of ignorance, which I don't know why they do that, but that's what they do. So if you study it, you'll get it, and you'll have nothing else to say besides stack sats or die trying.
Curiosity, what were some of the questions that you were asking? What were the places that you thought Bitcoin would fail?
I can't remember at this point, but I think I was just like, again, the Bitcoin hack thing, that's a big thing because it's digital. And the first thing that we all think is it's going to get hacked. Well, how is it going to get hacked? Saying Bitcoin's going to get hacked is like saying, well, someone's going to hack the internet. Like that sentence doesn't even make sense. You know what I mean? So unless you understand Bitcoin, you don't understand why that sentence doesn't make sense, But yeah, saying you're going to hack Bitcoin is like saying that they're going to hack the internet. That doesn't make sense at all. You're not going to hack the internet. You might hack a website or you might hack someone's bank account. You're not going to hack the internet. So stuff like that. And then I don't know, maybe like, oh, what happens when the last block is mined? I don't know. It was just a bunch of irrelevant stuff that now I can't even think about it. But we all have our fears. We all have our uncertainty. We all have our doubts. Those are valid, but you just have to try to reconcile them as best as you can. Don't just take someone's answer for it and leave it at that. Don't just take my answer for it and leave it at that. That would also make you an idiot. You know what I mean? I'm just some random kid on some podcast. Like, you cannot just trust everything I'm saying. You have to come to your conclusion on your own, but eventually we'll end up at the same place, but everyone has a different starting point. So start where you're at and then go from there. Don't just try to jump on something I'm saying, or jump on something that Bitcoin University said, or jump on something Nicki saying just because she's pretty lady. Like, you got to actually think, bro. So just think, and then you'll be good.
Agreed, 100%. And you know what? If you're watching this and you're like, well, I have so many questions, there's so many problems with Bitcoin, this is your future, man. I mean, I just asked and he can't even remember. And you've been in Bitcoin for how many years now?
It would be 6 now. 2019 is when I started.
Wow.
Like, I was just buying Bitcoin every day. I didn't get it. It was just, the number's going up, so I'm going to buy it. I only understood Bitcoin when I actually took the time to sit and read and look into it. That was around like 2022, So it just takes time. Back in the day, I had a bunch of Ethereum, and I had a bunch of XRP, and I had a bunch of Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision, and I had a bunch of Bitcoin Cash. And I didn't know what those all were. I just knew that they were all going up. So I was like, this is easy money. But now I would literally be unbelievably broke if I held all of those other things instead of Bitcoin, right? That's just how it is.
It's a great way to put it. I mean, Bitcoin is it's not just a number go up kind of thing. It's a network. This is a community. This is a revolution. This is a movement, if that resonates with you. This has been a killer conversation. I mean, I love having guests on, but this one has felt really different. I'm so glad you came on. I mean, so much fun for me. So much fun for me.
Immaculate vibes.
Totally, 100%. So any Gen Z student listening right now, if you feel stuck in a broken system, you're like, what the heck is going on? My money's going away. It's being stolen from me. Bitcoin. That's all I can say. And if you liked Jordan's style of answering questions and the stuff he says, he's got a great channel. Is there a place that people can find you and reach out to you if they want to chat or anything?
Yes, you can reach me on YouTube at GenZBTC, or you can reach me on Twitter, aka X, at GenZBTC as well. I'm on Nostr too. Nostr is like Twitter, except there is no Elon Musk. There is no CEO. There is no one who can tell you what you can or can't say, or you get canceled for the wrong opinion, stuff like that. So Nostr is a very powerful tool. I'm on there as well, at GenZBTC. So I got to start doing TikToks. I got to start doing YouTube shorts. I got to start doing reels, because that's where a lot of the Gen Zers are. I do a lot of long form content, and a lot of my audience, there are millennial, they are a little bit older, maybe Gen Xers, and I appreciate them, of course, but we got to try to capture the Gen Z audience. So I got to start making shorts for the little short attention span people out there, so I'll be working on that shortly. I guess pun intended. Shortly I'll be working on it, and that'll be great. So until then, just catch me on my channel. Really quick before we go, I also just wanted to say, embrace Bitcoin. Try to integrate it into your day-to-day as much as you can. And what I mean by that is not just going to the bar and chatting up all the baddies about Bitcoin. You can do that, but it's probably not the best strategy, right? You might even get pepper sprayed. I don't know. But what I do mean is, think about your job. I'm a transportation specialist, so I book trucks and I help people with ports, imports, and international shipments and warehousing and stuff like that. But I targeted a lot of Bitcoin companies, and that was really cool because I got to work with Hut 8. I got to work with Advanced Crypto Services. They're a Bitcoin miner repair company. I got to work with Compass Mining and TerraWolf and CleanSpark and all these other guys who I would never have been able to reach had it not been for me integrating Bitcoin into my day job, right? Even the opportunities that I've gotten, turning Bitcoin from just like a little hobby or something like that into a YouTube channel, right? It's got me a lot of opportunities. I get to speak with all sorts of amazing people. All the pretty girls want to talk to me, like Nicki, so that's cool. That probably wouldn't be happening if it weren't for Bitcoin. So you got to love that. So just make sure that you are embracing Bitcoin wherever you can. Try to do it in your daily life. If you're a yoga instructor and you have your own little shop and people come in, put a sign on your window saying Bitcoin accepted here, and that starts conversation. Me being someone who does transportation for Bitcoin companies, people at my job ask me, well, isn't Bitcoin digital? How are you doing freight for them? What are you moving? And then we start talking about ASICs. We start talking about miners, Bitcoin mining farms. I show them a picture of what that looks like. People and managers in the office, Mr. Jordan with a record breaker moving Bitcoin mining machines. Everyone give it up. Everyone's like, yay, whatever. But then they come over. They're like, bro, how you got Bitcoin mining machines as a commodity? What are you doing? It's just a way to expand the Bitcoin network through your lived experience. So don't just talk about it. You have to be about it, right? So really be the Bitcoin person as much as you can. If someone wants to get paid back because you went out for lunch, offer to pay them back in Bitcoin and show them how easy it is to accept it on Cash App. You know what I mean? Ask them to download Strike. Hey, I don't have Venmo. I don't have PayPal. Can you download Strike real quick? What is that? Well, here, let me show you. Just like integrate it in as best you can. That's my little ending monologue. So again, GenZBTC, find me anywhere. I was very well behaved for this interview, didn't want to scare the people away too much, but hopefully you learned something, and I'll hopefully see you on my channel a little bit later. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Stack sats or die trying. And I'll talk to you later. Nicki, thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's better than I could have closed out the episode. So I'll add links to Jordan's channel. And with that, I'll close this thing out. So as always, stay skeptical, stay curious, and stay orange filled. I'll see you next time.